Hello, and thank you for choosing Danomics. In our previous videos, we reviewed how to create a new decline curve analysis project, how to filter our data, set global constraints, and update our plots, and then we went and performed a manual decline curve analysis and added multi-segment declines. In this video, we're going to review how to create multi-well type curves so that you can help guide your declines on wells with short production histories. Let's get started. To do this, I'm going to choose the Type Curve uh, tab here. And to get started, I'm going to say New Type Curve. In this case, I'm focused on the Turner Formation. So I'm going to give this the name Turner. Our next step is we need to choose a well set. To do this, we'll click the plus button here, and it'll bring up a list of all the wells that are available in our project. Here, we're going to add some filters. Since I'm interested in the Turner Formation, I'm going to choose to filter by formation, and I'm going to say Turner. I'm going to add that filter. I also only want to filter on recently drilled wells, since I want to build my type curve on modern results. So in this case, I'm going to choose spud date. And I want a spud date that is after, and that would be greater than or equal to, and I'm going to say 2015 and hit add. Now we can see that we filter down to wells that are just in the Turner Formation that have a spud date after 2015. We could also filter by other criteria, but for this exercise, these are the two that we're going to choose. To move these wells into our well set, we can multi-select by holding down the Shift button, and we can send them over to our API list. I had 2 pages of results here, so I'm going to perform this operation twice. Then I'm going to hit OK. Once we've done this, it will add the oil and gas production rates to our curve. So we have a few options here, such as we can choose to put these on a log scale, and we can also choose to stagger our fluids. Okay, so now that we've done that, let's look at the decline itself. So there are a few things that I like to change here in the fluid before I set about putting my manual production. I typically like to put my cleanup days at around 31 days, which is 1 month of production. You'll notice this moves the start date. For the QF, I generally like to choose a value of around 10 barrels per day. This brings the decline curve into view here. Once I've done that, I like to set my decline curve parameters by doing this manually. So I can drag the value and I can drag it over to the area of interest on my wells. Now that I've set my decline for oil, I'd like to set my decline for the gas as well. To do this, I select Add Fluid, select Gas, and now I'll repeat this process. Okay, so now we have created our decline curve for both oil and gas. You may wish to see additional information on this graph, such as the well count. So here we can see that in our well count, we have around 200 wells at the start. And as we move out to around 7 years in production history, we're down to around 10 to 20 wells. And after that, it falls off rapidly. So this highlights where we may want to really focus on the areas where we have more well history. Other things that may come up, you can choose whether or not to remove empty periods from your production. These are periods when the well has been shut in and was not on production. And clicking this often will have a small result on your wells, and it may affect how you would wish to form this decline. That's one potential way to manipulate the data. Other ways that you can manipulate the data are by looking at how the data is normalized and how the data is aggregated. So to understand this better, let's look at the help that is provided. So by default, there is no normalization provided. This means that no scaling is applied and that your type curve will of course be dominated by the most productive wells. Max scales the wells based on the maximum value of that relevant fluid, while cum scales the wells based on the cumulative value of the relevant fluid. For aggregation methods, sum simply takes the sum of the data, average takes the sum of the data and then divides it by the well count. It should be noted that this option may introduce survivor bias. Hence, you would want to, when using this aggregation method, view it in jointly with the well count. And percentile will select a percentile of the data that you specify. For example, the 50th percentile. So let's take a look at how this affects our data. So let's switch over to normalization through a maximization. Here we can see that it has a small effect on the data, and if we do it by cum, once again we see a relatively small change here. Now the changes could be significantly different based on your data set. We'll go back to none for this exercise now. And for our aggregation method, first we're starting on sum by default. If we look at the average, here we can notice a significant change in our average production rate. And if we look at the percentile, now we notice that we're only seeing a shorter history, and that's driven by having the requisite amount of data necessary to create that percentile. Let's say we wanted to do this based on the average of our wells. Once we've done this, what we'll need to do is we'll need to adjust our declines. And you'll notice that as we drag and drop these, the decline on each of our fluids for gas and oil has been updated. In this case, this would lead us to a B factor of around 1 for our oil phase and in our gas phase of around 0.8. If these seem reasonable, we can choose to move along with this as our selected type curve. If we wish to look at potentially different scenarios or to create type curves for different formations, we can do that. For example, let's say I also want to create a type curve for the frontier formation, which is very similar to the Turner. To do that, I can say new, say frontier, and now I'll need to choose a well set. My first well set was for the Turner formation. Let's say I want to choose a second well set. I'm going to call this for the frontier. Add filter. Once again, I'll filter by formation, and I'll select the frontier. And let's say I want to look at spud date, and I will say greater than or equal to 2015, add, and then I'll select the relevant wells and send those to my well set and hit OK. Once again, I can choose my normalization options, and I'm going to put this on average. Once I've done this, I will make a few updates here, as well as put this on log scale and add my well count. So now that I have my decline for oil identified, I'm going to create that for gas. I'm going to say add fluid, select gas. I'm going to make some initial changes, and then I will go through and customize my decline. Okay, now we have two type curves that are available to us, and we also have two well sets. If you wish to modify either the names on these, we can do so. For example, if we select this and we can edit, and we can call this Turner, because these were wells that were selected from the Turner Formation. This will help you better organize your well sets. So since we're looking at the frontier type curve, let's look at the frontier well set. Okay, once we've done that, now how do we use these type curves? Let's come back to our decline curve analysis. Okay, so now let's choose a well that has a relatively short production history. To help make this easier to find, I'm going to adjust my spud date to wells that were drilled in 2021 or later. So here we see we have a small number of wells, and here we can see that it's really only fitting data to 1 or 2 points. This is not ideal for an automated fit, but it's a great example of how we can use a type curve here. So now we can come in, and from our fit, we can select to use our Turner type curves for both of these. And we can see that it updates the parameters to match those of our decline curve. So once again, we can go to our next well. We can choose to put on those Turner decline curves. So previously, identifying a decline was based on the data was impossible, but now we've done it using our declines. Okay, that's it for this video. Once again, we reviewed how to create a type curve for a few different sets of wells, how we can normalize and aggregate our data, and then how we can apply those type curves to wells with short production histories to get a better idea of what the EURs might be. Remember, once you've completed this work, make sure to save it by going File, Save, or by hitting Control-S. If you have any questions, please contact us at support@danomics.com. Thank you.